This is the Content Marketing Podcast, episode number 68, How Fascinating is Your Content? Part 5, Power. Hello and welcome to the Content Marketing Podcast. This is the show where we help you attract and retain business through the power of quality content. I'm your host, Rachel Parker of Resonance Content Marketing, and today is April 24th, 2014. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for episode number 68 of the Content Marketing Podcast. Just a reminder, we are live on iTunes and on Stitcher, so if you're listening to this episode on the blog, you can click on over and subscribe. That means you'll get new episodes automatically delivered to your smartphone or your iPod or your listening device of choice. And if you use a different app for your podcast listening pleasure, we also have an RSS feed, and I will provide that link in the blog post. In last week's podcast, we continued our series called How Fascinating is Your Content, based on Sally Hogshead's groundbreaking marketing book called Fascinate, Your 7 Triggers to Persuasion and Captivation. And last week we were talking about the 4th of the fascination triggers, and that is prestige. So if you happen to miss that episode, feel free to click on over to iTunes or to Stitcher or to the RSS feed and get all caught up. So that brings me to today's topic. Today we're continuing our How Fascinating is Your Content series by tackling the 5th of the fascination triggers, and that is power. But first, let's check in with our news feed for this week's rundown of news you can use. This week, Twitter has announced another new feature that will be rolling out gradually to all users, and that is real-time notifications. So when you are logged onto Twitter and someone replies, favorites, or retweets one of your tweets, you will see a little notice pop up at the bottom of your Twitter screen, kind of like, let's see, what other social network does that? Maybe Facebook. It's kind of interesting to see that how Twitter is adapting some more Facebook qualities. We talked about the new profile and how it's very, very Facebook-like, and now this is another Facebook kind of Me Too feature. So kind of interesting to see what's going on over at Twitter. Speaking of Facebook, the world's largest social network is making some moves to clean up spam in your news feed. And it is in particular going after 3 different practices. Number 1, like baiting. So if you've seen those posts that say, if you love your mom, click like or leave a comment. And if you hate your mom, just keep scrolling or something like that. Something to really, really manipulative attempts at getting likes and comments on that post. So they're going after that. They're also going after frequently circulated content. So some pages, what they're doing is they will say upload a photo or a video. And if that gets a good response, they'll keep uploading those photos and those videos over and over and over again to try and get more likes and more engagement. And then the third activity that they're cracking down on is spammy links. So you might see a Facebook post that promises to link you to a photo album or something that you find interesting, and then you click through only to find out that it's a spam site. It's just a bunch of ads and nothing of value there. So those are the 3 practices that Facebook is cracking down on. And if you are following best practices, if you are running your Facebook page on the level, you really shouldn't have anything to worry about. But I do want to make sure that you're aware of Facebook trying to crack down on spammers, and that's good for all of us, right? Another little item is out of SlideShare, which is, of course, one of my favorite kind of dark horse social networks. Love SlideShare. They have upgraded their mobile apps so that when you go to SlideShare on your mobile device, you can just swipe through to get through those slide decks. You don't have to click on the actual little button on the screen. You can swipe through, and that makes a better mobile experience. So pretty cool feature from our friends at SlideShare. Okay, for our content hit of the week, we are talking SEO. Specifically, we're talking about a blog post called How to Audit Your Website Content for SEO. That was written by Amanda DiSilvestro over at the Content Marketing Institute blog. And the reason I like this post is that, those updates from Google are just coming fast and furious. We had Panda, we had Penguin, then we had Panda 2.0, and now we're getting into 3.1s and Lord knows what else. Those updates are just flying fast and furious. So you really do need to do a regular audit of your site to make sure that it's still working to attract search traffic as Google updates its algorithm. So I like this post because it really goes through a checklist of things to check on your website to make sure that it's still SEO, search optimized. And more importantly, so she goes through a number of things to check for, but more importantly, she lets you know about a few tools out there that exist to help you get that job done, to help you complete that audit and fix what you need to fix. And one tip that she definitely gives is write down everything that you do, because as you do these audits, you're going to forget things that come up. So definitely keep a log of how you are addressing these issues as they arise. Anyway, this post is a really good resource and I highly recommend it, and therefore I will provide the link to you in the blog post. That is it for this week's update. If you stumble across something you think might be of interest to your fellow content marketers, please shoot it on over to us so we can share, and I will provide that contact info at the end of the podcast. Now it's time for this week's Spotlight segment. How fascinating is your content? Part 5, Power. Today we're continuing our series based on Sally Hogshead's book, Fascinate, Your 7 Triggers to Persuasion and Captivation. And if you're just joining us, let me give you a little bit of background. So this book came out a few years ago, and what Sally does is she goes through 7 triggers that cause us, and by us I mean human beings, whoever you happen to may be, 7 triggers that cause us to become fascinated, whether that's fascination with a person, with an object, with an experience, or with an idea. And it is truly a fascinating book, pun intended. And as I was reading it, I got to think about how we can apply these fascination triggers to our work as content marketers. So we've gone through triggers number 1 through 4, and today we'll be discussing the 5th fascination trigger, and that is power. Now, of all the 7 triggers, power is probably the trickiest to define. It's one of those things we just kind of know it when we see it. So the powerful ones are the alphas of the pack, whatever pack we happen to be talking about. So in the family, it's the parents. At workplace, it's the boss. In school, it's the teacher or the professor. And at the gym, it's the trainer. And in the locker room and on the practice field, it's the coach. So whoever that alpha is going to be the power player in that situation. And I'm going to quote from the book here directly. Sally says, quote, "Powerful people share an ability to both make decisions and influence decisions," unquote. So to take an example, imagine getting an email from your boss on a Friday afternoon telling you that your presentation to senior management has been moved up to Monday morning instead of Thursday as you were planning. Now, think about this. The boss has made the decision to reschedule the meeting because he can, and his decision has an impact on your decision as to how you're going to spend your weekend. So that's an example of the power of power at work. And power can come from wealth, it can come from position, like the boss or the coach, or it can come from more subtle assets like information. Sometimes in some organizations, people with the information are the ones who have the power. And I know for some of us, for me at least, when I hear about power being used to influence, I tend to think of the iron fist, my way or the highway, or do this or else. But actually power is, and quoting from the book here again, a necessary ingredient in many forms of structure, training, and motivation to achieve higher results. So really anyone who has ever hired a coach or a consultant or a trainer, what you've in essence done is voluntarily given that person power over you. You've said, hey, I want to achieve these results. I know that you have the ability to tell me what I need to do it, and given them that ability to tell you what to do and when, where, and how to do it, whether that is a business coach telling you to make so many phone calls over the course of the month, or your trainer at the gym telling you how many sit-ups you need to do before you can move on to the next exercise. Quoting from the book again, used intelligently and selectively, this trigger strengthens your reputation and earns respect. And she goes on to talk about how marketers can access the power trigger in 3 different ways: by dominating, by controlling the environment, and by implementing a system of rewards and punishments. So the first venue, let's say, to power is to dominate. In the presence of power, she writes, we instinctively become submissive. And you might have seen this principle in action if you've ever worked for a very arrogant boss, or a boss who's a real blowhard. And suddenly you see this boss in an interaction with his boss, or maybe with his boss's boss, or maybe the CEO of the company. You're likely to see a very different person. And a powerful person or a powerful organization can dominate in different ways. They can dominate a market. They can dominate the norms of a social group. If you have a group of friends, there are probably the alphas that you could name off the top of your head, or they could dominate a system. And a great example of this is on social media. Think about the ongoing quest to get more and more and more Facebook fans, or more and more Twitter followers, to the point where companies are actually buying them just so they can get those numbers up higher. And, why do we care about this? Well, because more followers make us look more powerful. The second venue is to control the environment. So basically, powerful entities can say, if you do this, then you will be able to do this. Or if you do this, then this can happen. And 2 great examples of this are, number 1, iTunes terms of use. Now, every once in a while, you got to log onto iTunes and it will say, oh, we've changed our terms of service. And there's agree, and there's, God forbid, the, disagree, or maybe even not a disagree button, agree or else. And then another example is TSA. And Lord knows the situation at airport security over the last few years. I mean, we go through some ridiculous gyrations to get through that security checkpoint. So, but it's because those entities control their environments. So with iTunes, if you want to use this service, you have got to accept these terms of use. And if you go through a metal detector with your shoes off and your hands up and no liquid containers over 3 ounces in your carry-on, then lo and behold, you get to board your flight. And that's it. No cooperation, no deal. So that's how controlling the environment is another venue to that power trigger. And the third venue is to reward and punish. So powerful entities can reward desired behavior and punish undesired behavior. And those of you who are parents, I'm sure you are well aware and appreciative of those specific reward punish buttons that enable you to demand things like clean rooms and kept curfews and completed homework. You probably have your own very intricate system of rewards and punishments to encourage that desired behavior. So that's a little bit about how Sally presents the power trigger in her book in speaking to general marketers. So how can we specifically as content marketers leverage that power trigger? And to do that, let's revisit those 3 venues that Sally talks about to using the power trigger. So if you recall, the first one was dominate. And as content marketers, we can dominate by becoming thought leaders in our field. And really, if you look at everything that we're doing, yes, we are connecting with our audience and we are building relationships, but we've also kind of got our eye on that thought leader prize. We want to be the name that's associated with our industry. And by putting that quality content out on a regular basis, we can become the guy, for lack of a better phrase, the go-to person, the guru for our industry. And that's desirable because that presents us with the ability to dominate. Also, remember those social numbers are also a sign of domination, not denomination, domination. And there are, for example, if you look on some websites where they ask you to follow them on Twitter or like them on Facebook, they will actually have the numbers there of this is how many Twitter followers we have and these are how many fans we have on Facebook. There's also a way to display your clout score. I mean, marketers will absolutely fight tooth and nail to get that clout score upped by a point. And why do they do that? There's no money associated with it. There's nothing tangible, but getting that number higher implies that you are a more dominant player, no matter what field you happen to be playing in. So the second venue we talked about is controlling the environment. And just like iTunes can demand acceptance of its terms of service to access the store, we can demand or actually politely request certain actions to gain access of things that we offer. And the perfect example of this is offering your ebook through a landing page that requests your name and your email address. That's actually a method of leveraging the power trigger. It's saying that, okay, I have something you want, so I can force you or again, politely ask you to take an action, which is basically for you to become a lead in my database in exchange for the item that you want. So content marketers have the ability to control that environment and to leverage the power trigger that way. Another method of controlling the environment is sometimes publications like the Harvard Business Review will publish a story, and you'll be able to go to the story and read the maybe first couple of paragraphs, and then it will say the rest of this is only available to subscribers. And that is their way of influencing people to subscribe to their site for a fee, of course. So that's another example of controlling the environment. And finally, the reward and punish system. So as content marketers, we can definitely reward those who help us out. We can, for example, if someone puts a comment on a blog post, we can just simply say thank you. We can link back and forth to businesses who link to our site. Also, we can reciprocate. So if let's say a complimentary business shares our content on a regular basis, we can certainly reciprocate by sharing theirs. And that's kind of our way of using a reward system to demonstrate, yes, I like this behavior, and this is how I'm going to show my appreciation. And I guess we can also punish in a certain way by excluding people. So for example, if someone puts spammy posts on your Facebook page, we can punish them by banning them from posting any further. Or if, let's say, trolls pop up on a comment link on a blog post, we can delete those posts. We can ban people from commenting again. So we can leverage that as well in exercising the power trigger. So that's my take on how we as content marketers can tap into the fascination trigger of power. If you have any questions about today's Spotlight segment, or if you want to add to the conversation, I would love to hear from you, and I will provide that contact information at the end of the podcast. Next week, we will continue our series based on Sally Hogshead's book, Fascinate, Your 7 Triggers to Persuasion and Captivation, with the 6th of these 7 triggers, and that is Vice. Should be interesting. Now it's time for our content marketing tip of the week. For today's tip, I want to pose the question, what grade level is your content? So let me explain. You may have heard that among the best practices for user experience on a website is to keep the writing at or around the 6th to 8th grade reading level. And that would be the reading level that corresponds to students in the 6th to 8th grade here in the United States. And sometimes when I mention this to clients, I really get a lot of pushbacks. And they tell me, oh, we have a very highly educated audience. They are far beyond 6th to 8th grade reading levels. How dare you suggest such a thing? But actually, that standard has almost nothing to do with the education level of the audience, but it has everything to do with how we take in information online. So no matter what our individual levels of education may be, when we human beings, whoever you are, when we read content online, we are much more likely to respond positively to a style that employs shorter words, shorter sentences, and shorter paragraphs. And that style happens to correspond to a 6th to 8th grade reading level. So that's where that standard comes from. And there are actually several free tools out there that will let you assess the reading level of your content. You can either put in the URL of a specific page, or you can actually copy and paste your content right there on the tool on the site. One is called readable.com. That's READ-ABLE.com. And there are several others out there. So I would suggest just go to Google and type in website content readability test, and you will find several options there. And what that will do is really help you optimize your website content for a better user experience. Okay, campers, that is it for me today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Content Marketing Podcast. I've certainly enjoyed bringing it to you. If you like what you've heard today, please feel free to subscribe on iTunes or Stitcher or via our RSS feed. And if you really like what you've heard, please leave us a quick review on iTunes. I would so appreciate it. For more information about content marketing, you're welcome to visit our blog at resonancecontent.com/blog, where you'll also find links to our pages on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and other social networks. If you'd like to email me a question to cover in an upcoming tip of the week, you can contact me anytime at rachel@resonancecontent.com. As always, I like to leave you with a quote, and today's comes from Stephen King. Now, I've quoted from him before, and I'm actually not a huge fan of his novels because, yes, I can say it, I'm a great big scaredy cat, and I'm not into that horror genre. But he actually wrote one of my favorite books on writing, and it's called simply On Writing by Stephen King, and I absolutely love it because the first part of the book, he talks about his origins and how he came to be a writer and kind of his path to fame and fortune. And the second part is his very practical advice to writers. And I just love it. He's actually a very funny guy. I listened to the book for the first time on audiobook, and he reads it himself, and he's actually quite funny and very, very charming and very engaging. So if you're looking for a resource to add to your bookshelf, I highly recommend On Writing by Stephen King. Okay, that aside, here is today's quote. Stephen King once said, quote, "The road to hell is paved with adverbs," unquote. Again, this is Rachel Parker with Resonance Content Marketing. Thank you again for listening, and we will see you again next week. Take care.